Hi everyone, I'm Rachel Vi, and this is my presentation on Eastern equine encephalitis. So how has Eastern equine encephalitis been understood? Well, at first everyone thought it was encephalitis lethargica, which is a disease that basically affects the brain tissue. It causes swelling in the brain and was causing people to just be super tired, and it also happened in animals as well. The first case of equine encephalitis was in 1831. People started noticing that their horses were acting really strange, and they didn't at the time know that it was that disease, but that's when they figured it out. It's seen in birds as well, and we now know that it is a zoonotic disease. So what did people think caused triple E? It was seen in a lot of birds, so people were pretty confused because they weren't understanding how it was spreading to humans, because avians don't often bite humans. It's a very rare case, and they were seeing it in a much larger proportion that wouldn't make sense, that it was just because birds were biting people. Has there been a change in how triple E has been defined? At first, people called it the sleeping sickness, again, because they thought it was the encephalitis lethargica. But basically, people would get sick, and then very soon after they started experiencing symptoms, they would go into a coma. So that's what they called it. At first, it was thought to be a strictly avian and equine disease. We now know it is zoonotic and can spread between animals and people. What we have found is that what spreads the disease is mosquitoes, and they are what people call the bridge vectors. So the symptoms that have been attributed to this disease are pretty gnarly. So at first in horses, I found a account of someone who basically wrote about how their horse was acting in 1831. So they were riding their horse. It seemed incredibly lethargic. It was experiencing neurological symptoms. So no matter what, the horse was leaning towards the left, and she couldn't get it to walk straight. It was weak. Once she finally got it back, it didn't recognize its stall. It was cold to the touch, and it was also shaking and feverish. It was experiencing convulsions. It quickly worsened, and then the horses would die a couple days after their symptoms started. For humans, it's not that different. However, it does depend on what part of the brain is infected. So at first, the symptoms are so nonspecific that people don't normally notice, and that's why it happens so fast that people go into a worsened state. So basically, depending on what part of the brain it is, you could have a headache, a stomach ache, just very nonspecific symptoms. After 5 days, however, people start experiencing the neurological symptoms. So they'll have altered levels of consciousness, paresthesias, which is basically when you feel tingling feelings all over your body, mild confusion, fatigue. It would also cause people to have seizures, slight paralysis. Basically, what would happen is that people would, depending on how bad the infection was, develop meningitis. So their brain fluid, their spinal fluid would become infected, and their brain would swell until quickly after those 5 days, they enter a coma. And then, well, we'll find out in the next slide what happens after that. Outlook, not good. So the mortality rate is 30 to 40%, meaning that a third of people who contract this virus die. Out of those who do survive, about a third are left with a permanent neurological disability. So basically, although the disease is extremely rare, if you get it, it's not a very good outlook, and even if you do survive, you're going to be left permanently disabled. And death can occur 2 to 10 days after infection, which is scary because 2 days is obviously not a long amount of time. How has triple E been treated by the medical community? Again, it was originally thought to be encephalitis lethargica. There were multiple outbreaks before 1933. Like I said, it started in 1831. But when there was an outbreak in 1933 that affected mainly horses, doctors thought it was a new disease and were treating it as if it was a new disease. Once they kind of realized that wasn't the case, they found out it was zoonotic by taking the virus from the horse, and they injected it into guinea pigs, and then the guinea pigs developed symptoms just like the horses had, and then quickly died after. At one point, they noticed that birds were all dying in the same areas that humans were contracting the virus. They basically were just dropping dead in these areas, and it was to the point where it didn't make any sense, so they kind of made that link. Eventually, they determined it was spread by mosquitoes from biting the birds or the horses and then biting humans. However, the mosquito that does cause this disease is mainly a mosquito that bites birds and not often humans, so that's probably why the spread is so rare. What treatments have doctors prescribed for EEE? For horses, they would bloodlet them. Like we talked about before in class, they would take out about 2 gallons of blood from horses, and horses have 12 and a half gallons of blood. And for humans, they really knew so little about the disease that all they could do is give supportive care. Currently, we're honestly kind of in the same situation. We just have better supportive care. So there's no antivirals that work against it. People have tried using intravenous immunoglobulins, which is a treatment that affects your immune system. It's used to treat immune and neurological disorders, but the statistics for that aren't very great. Some case studies have shown that it worked great and the person survived. Others, it didn't work at all and they died. They use it on multiple different diseases. So, I think one of the people that survived had lymphoma. But really, the only treatment we have for Eastern equine encephalitis is supportive care. So that's probably why the survival rate is higher in humans than it is in horses, because we don't really give supportive care to horses. So for humans, we'll hospitalize them, give them intravenous fluids, and have to intubate them and give them respiratory support. And that's really all we can do for them. So how has Triple E been viewed by society, and has it changed? So there have been multiple outbreaks in the U.S. from 1831 to 2019. Like I said before, when an outbreak occurred in 1933, physicians treated it like it was a new virus. It was mostly among horses that the outbreak in 33 occurred. 90% of the 1,000 horses who contracted the illness during this outbreak died, which is just a huge mortality rate. And like I said, it was lesser in humans because we give humans supportive care, whereas for horses, it's not really the case. People kind of really started paying attention to the disease in 1938 because there was a huge outbreak among children. Out of the 34 cases, there were 25 deaths in 1938. So this was a huge thing. The kids were just, once they developed symptoms, quickly after going into a coma and dying. And then people realized that this was a disease that they needed to pay attention to. But that was in 1938, obviously, and most of us, well, all of us weren't alive then. So now people are mainly unaware that Triple E exists because it's so rare. The most recent outbreak was 12 people in Massachusetts in 2019, and I had no idea that even happened. I'm pretty sure the general public is not aware of it. These are my references. Thank you so much for listening to this lecture. I hope you learned something. I know I did, and have a great day.